Right. Well, again, a lot of it is mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of ageist bullshit in the world, especially aimed at females. I mean, anti-aging this and detox this, and it's just constant bombardment of aging is bad, essentially, is what the industry is telling us.
Right.
So we need to take that back.
You're listening to the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. I'm your host, Kathleen Gage. We're here to plant seeds on compassion to animals, your health, and the environment, and topics related to business that align with all three of those areas. Enjoy the show. So, Karina, it is so great to see you again. I'm really excited to dig into your vegan story, your business story, your authorship story. I just want to know more about you. So, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Kathleen. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been good to connect in various capacities, so this is great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting because I know that you've been a vegan for 21 years, which means you had to be pretty young when you became vegan. A lot of us, like I was in my 60s when I became vegan. And so I'm kind of curious, how did you, if you will, get the bug to be vegan?
Great question. So yeah, you're right. I was 16. And back then we did not have social media. I was using libraries. Remember those?
I do. And I still love going to libraries. I
I
have to
know,
admit.
right? Yeah, so it happened kind of slowly. It started in 1998 when I went vegetarian, at which point I was 11. So that's when I decided that I wanted nothing to do with the killing of animals, the horrendous treatment of animals in the animal agriculture industry. And so I went vegetarian, which was the first step. But at that point, I'm not using this as an excuse, but we didn't have YouTube. We didn't have social media. We didn't have vegan documentaries. So it took me 5 years to realize that the meat and the dairy and the egg industries are all one and the same. They are all related. They feed each other. If you drink milk, you support the veal industry. If you eat eggs, you support the chicken meat industry. So it took me a while to figure that out. But once I did, I went vegan immediately.
Interesting. I just met a young gal. I was at a fundraiser over the weekend and it was sponsored by Texas Roadhouse. So you know that they had a lot of meat there. And I went into the kitchen and I found a young woman that was working the buffet. And I said, is there any way I could get something that doesn't have meat and dairy in it? And she said, are you vegan? I said, actually, yes, I am. She goes, I am too. And I
Oh,
said, well, how
cool.
long have you been vegan? She goes, 2 years. And it was kind of like she had the stars in her eyes, like, oh my gosh, I met another vegan. This is great. And it's interesting because it's kind of a secret club in a way. And yet
hmm
I think one of the advantages of COVID is that a lot of people started searching for how they could get healthy. And, back 20 years ago, there was no internet like we have today.
hmm
So you're right, there wasn't the access. Let's kind of spin on that for a second, because I know that a lot of times when somebody posts something about a vegan meal or a plant-based meal, people, the trolls come in and the
hmm
bots come in and they start the arguments. And the bots are designed to have the arguments and people start engaging. How would you advise somebody who starts engaging with what really is a bot or a troll, in order to not get sucked into that?
Well, that's a great question. I think you need to go into it knowing what your expectations are. Expectation management for trolls. So what I do is I do it for my own amusement. I'm on all these food groups that aren't necessarily vegan, and I love engaging with trolls because it's entertaining for me. Now, that's not the case for everyone else. Some people get really worked up and it's bad for their blood pressure and their mental health. And I would recommend you don't even engage at that point. So I think it honestly starts with your mindset. What are you hoping to get out of this interaction? And so for me, it's two things. One, my own amusement, because I think it's hilarious. And two, it's for other people reading those interactions. So I'm not expecting to change the mind of some rando troll, but there's other people who are seeing this interaction and are like, interesting. Maybe this is something I could pursue.
That
So
is such a great way to look at it. I really appreciate that. And myself as a writer, and I definitely want to get into your books. What I like to do is when I find a discussion going on, I actually will go and write a blog post about it. I actually did a blog
exactly.
post about
Yes.
the fundraiser, and I talked about how it was a fundraiser. I'm a vegan, and they had a buffet,
Hmm.
and it was barbecue. And I have to tell you, it was kind of difficult being around 150 people that I was probably the only vegan there that I
Yeah, I
could
hear you.
see. And it was kind of hard watching them spread their butter on their roll and all that good stuff.
Hmm.
But so what I did is I wrote a blog post about my experience of meeting this young vegan, and I put a list of books and a list of
Hmm.
documentaries, and then I
Well, that's it
posted it all over
exactly.
social. Yeah, yeah. So
It's
there's
fodder for further information that's actually going to help people. So
bingo.
I one time did a big collage of all the responses to a vegan dish that I posted in a non-vegan group. There's like one of two things that all these trolls say. It's usually, oh my God, that's unhealthy. Or, oh my God, if you want to eat meat so badly because you're using all these fake meats, why don't you just eat meat? It's always the same stuff. The same. Anyway, so I did this big collage of like 20 people saying the same thing, and I made a blog post out of it. So you can absolutely use those things as fodder for your own content that's
Absolutely.
actually going to be useful.
Absolutely. So, and let's kind of jump into the authorship. Now, you've written 5 books. Out of all the 5 books you've written, which one would you say has been your favorite that you've written? It's kind of like
Great
asking
question.
which child do you love the
Which
most?
child is your favorite? Well, here's the thing. So the disclaimer is that all the books except for 2 of them have been the idea of my publisher. So the
Mm,
very first book that I wrote is called Vegan Vitality. That was my idea. I went and got a lit agent. We looked for a publisher. We did the whole process. It got published. And then the next 3 books were the publisher coming to me saying, hey, we want to come out with a book on strength training with resistance bands. Do you want to write it? Or, hey, we want to do a version of the resistance bands books for seniors. Do you want to write it? So, of course, I said yes, these are great opportunities. But basically, what this means is that Vegan Vitality was the original passion
hmm
project.
hmm
And what I would say is my favorite book is actually The Vegan Athlete, which is the second edition of that book. So it's more updated, it has more scientific information about nutrition. So it's very similar to Vegan Vitality, it's just way newer and more updated.
Right, right. Now, have you co-authored any of these books, or are they all solo
They're
authorship?
all solo, all me.
Okay. And as an author myself, I know that there are certain challenges. And for a lot of authors, their challenge is getting started. That's never been my problem. It's like I get an idea. Got an idea for a book on fear last week, and I'm almost done with it because I
Oh
just
my
sit
goodness.
down and I download. And
Yeah.
of course, there's the whole editing process and all of that. But what would you say to an aspiring author who really has a message that they want to get out to market, but they keep stopping themselves?
That's a great question. You know, I think what stops people is the goal is too big. Oh my God, I have to write a whole book. That's so hard. It's going to take forever. I'm never going to finish it. So that's what stops people. It's an all or nothing. Either you write 200 pages in one sitting or you never write anything. So the mindset switch you need to make is 1 page a day, 2 pages a week, whatever you find is feasible. For me, when I wrote my first book, it took 3 years because not only did I have to write a book, I had to make 50 dishes and have photo shoots. I did 5 10-hour photo shoots with my photographer friend over multiple months where I was in the kitchen, he was taking photos.
hmm
It's a whole thing. So breaking it down into smaller chunks and making it more of a process rather than a goal, which is exactly, by the way, what we do with fitness. It's not, hey, I want to do 10 pull ups in a row. It's, oh, I have to work on my 2 pull up exercises for 4 minutes a day. It's exactly the same.
Well, I did see something in your bio about when you like get an idea on something, you go and do a bunch of pull-ups or something. How many pull-ups can you do?
All of them, Kathleen, all of them. It depends. It depends if they're weighted, depends what variation. The most chin ups I've ever done in a row with perfect form was 15, but
Wow,
it hasn't been
that's
to that level for
impressive.
a while.
That's impressive. And I know that you actually have a master's degree in, I think it's genealogy. Is that how you pronounce it?
Gerontology.
Gerontology. Okay.
Hmm.
Let's talk about that because I turned 70 in May, and as much as I don't want to admit it, my body is changing. And it's like I just resisted that and resisted that. I went through a period where I bought into, okay, I'm going to be a frumpy middle-aged woman. I really did go through that. And I gained a bunch of weight. It was after my mom's passing, and a lot of emotional stuff going on. And then when I really got hold of that and said, okay, that's not going to be okay, that's when I actually went plant-based. I dropped a bunch of weight, got in really great shape, was lifting weights, had a trainer for that. And I've lifted weights since I was in my mid 30s. So it wasn't like foreign to me. But
Hmm.
what I've noticed over the last 6 months, one is I have had an issue with vegan junk food, which, that's kind of my boogaboo. And also the body is changing. So what would you say to older men and women about the changes that we go through and how we can reduce the speed at which they happen and even reverse some of it?
Right. Well, again, a lot of it is mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of ageist bullshit in the world, especially aimed at females. I mean, anti-aging this and detox this, and it's just constant bombardment of aging is bad, essentially, is what the industry is telling us.
Right.
So we need to take that back. I've actually had hairstylists, not my current one because she's awesome, but in the past kind of make like little nudges like, hey, have you ever considered dyeing your hair? Because I'm not even 40. I got a decent amount of gray hair. And I'm like, no, why would you ask me that? This is all part of the ageist BS
Right.
concept of you can't show your age. So part of it is accepting that, yes, of course, there are going to be changes that happen. Yeah, of course, it's a natural process. It's a gift to be able to age. Not everyone gets that opportunity. We need to embrace that. However, there's a lot of aging, and I'm using air quotes here, that is actually disuse and not the aging process itself. So, in one sense, yeah, of course, there are natural things that happen as we age. But in another sense, there's a lot we can do to maintain ourselves, to get stronger, to affect our body composition. And that's where strength training comes in. So it's honestly, if there were a fountain of youth, which of course there isn't, but if there were, strength training would be the closest thing to the fountain of youth. Maintaining muscle mass, maintaining bone density, especially as females. So the strength training piece, whatever that looks like for someone, it can be resistance bands,
Mm-hmm.
it can be at home. You do not have to spend hours in a gym if you don't want to. That is super important, not just for maintaining your function long term, but also to mitigate, let's call it, the aging process.
Right, right. Well, let's kind of break that down because it is a very real thing for me when I go to the grocery store and I see people who are my age, and in a sense I'm kind of shocked that that could have been the choice I made, which is
Mm-hmm.
the motorized scooters that they use now, the walkers, things of that nature. And not that I won't ever need to have a knee replacement because I was a runner for quite a while too, but I'm really looking at it from the perspective of wanting to be an example of what is possible. So let's look
Mm-hmm.
at the whole picture of as we age. What are some of the things that besides weight training, and starting with how does somebody go from maybe they're a couch potato, because I know that book From Couch Potato to 5K was a
Mm-hmm.
really popular book. So let's start with people who have been sedentary for a while. They've heard about the whole plant-based movement. They've heard that exercise is good. What would you advise to them over a 6-month period?
Right. Good question. Okay, I feel like there's a little bit of a caveat here. It might sound a bit off track, but I do want to mention that I'm not plant-based for health. I'm
Okay.
plant-based for ethical reasons. So, yeah,
Okay.
it has health benefits if you do it in a certain way, for sure. But I don't want to get into the rabbit hole of vegan or plant-based eating specifically for quote dietary
Okay.
reasons.
Okay. Perfect.
Um, Now that's part of it. And you know what? A lot of folks come to veganism for health, and that is perfectly okay. But I feel like for those folks who are going to stick with it long term, there's at least some ethical piece there. So, anyways, that could be a whole other discussion.
Right.
But the plant-based thing, yes, of course it has health benefits if you're eating mostly whole foods, if you're eating food that you 80% of the time make yourself. And I think the same advice is applicable to either changing your diet or creating a workout routine. You can't bite off too much. You have to start out with something that almost feels too easy. Like there's not an option for you to miss a 4-minute workout. It has
Right.
to be that easy. Maybe you start with 10 push-ups a day or 5 squats. Like make it kind of ridiculous for yourself that it's so easy. Same with plant-based eating. Start with your breakfast. Just leave it at that for a couple weeks. Test out some vegan breakfasts. Have some oatmeal. Try a tofu scramble. Don't even think about the rest of your day. I think what happens with a lot of people is they bite off too much, they feel overwhelmed, and then they quit, whether
Right.
it's working out, whether it's going plant-based, whatever it is. So the plant-based thing is kind of its own beast. You could take 6 months to go from an omnivore to someone who's vegan if you want. I've got a lot of friends who made a transition pretty slowly, but it stuck for 20 years and they're never going back. So that's a very individual approach. It kind of depends where someone is right now. On the strength training front, usually where we start with clients is one of two options. Option A is a very, very short 5 to 10 minute session, 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, especially if someone's still working. Sometimes that can fit into their work schedule. Super easy, short, multiple sessions a week to teach your brain that this is something consistent that you can do. And the other option, because that doesn't always work for folks, we have a new client who works 12-hour shifts in a hospital and
Mhm.
has an hour and a half commute each way to work. So there's only so many
Ooh,
minutes a day if
right.
you're also going to food prep and sleep and, have some semblance of a life. So for someone like that, we would recommend 3 days a week of slightly longer workouts, like maybe 20 minutes to start off with. Still manageable. You don't have to do it every single day. And having a plan when you go into those sessions is key. So you're not wasting time saying, oh, well, what moves am I going to do today? You have a step 1, step 2, I'm going to do this superset, then I'm going to do this. So it's a process,
Right.
and the smaller chunk that you bite off at first, the better.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Now, Karina, how can people reach you? What's the best website or social media platform for people to find you?
KarinaInkster.com is basically the hub of all things ridiculous accordion shenanigans and also veganism.
Okay. Okay. Well, I know that you like teach on the side, you teach accordion, you teach piano, and you teach, what is this called?
Didgeridoo.
What in the heck is that?
That is an indigenous Australian instrument. So it's probably the world's oldest wind instrument. It's tens of thousands of years old. It's literally just a hollow log. Traditionally, it's hollowed out by termites and it's made out of a eucalyptus tree. It's a very, like you'd recognize the sound. It's a droning,
Right.
very deep, earthy sound. And so actually, I've been playing that for longer than I have been playing accordion, which is my main instrument. And yeah, people connect with it. It's a rhythm instrument, but it's also a wind instrument, so it makes it a bit different. And so I teach that and accordion 1 day a week.
That's
And yeah,
incredible.
it's been great.
And what drew you to the accordion and that wind instrument?
Well, the accordion, I already played piano, so I've been playing piano since I was 5.
Okay.
The accordion is basically a piano on the right hand, and then the left hand is buttons. So the accordion came about from the Jan Tiersen soundtrack to the Amélie French movie by director Genet. Amazing soundtrack, very accordion centric. I heard that and I'm like, okay, one day I need to learn to play the accordion.
That's incredible. That's
And then the didgeridoo is honestly very random. I was 14. I was playing in a youth orchestra. Oboe was my thing back in the day. And at the rehearsal space, it was like an arts center for music and visual arts. There was a sign that said didgeridoo lessons with Don Portalance. And my dad had just visited Australia. So I was like, hey, I know what that is. So I just tried it out, did a couple lessons with a family friend, and it just really stuck. I made a connection with it. I went to Australia a couple times and met with Indigenous makers of the instrument and bought from them. And now I play in a band.
That's incredible. Now, how many people are in the band?
There's 4 of us. So I play 6 different didgeridoos in different keys, not all at the same time.
Right.
And then we have bass, drums, trumpet, and keyboard played by the same person.
And where do you play? Do you play locally or do you travel?
Yeah.
Or?
We haven't traveled yet. We've played festivals locally. We're actually doing a show this Saturday at one of our
incredible.
Community spaces. Yeah, it's been fun.
Now, is your music available online?
You know what? The first album will be pretty soon. So we've been in
Okay.
studio
Okay.
over the past couple of weeks. And in May, the first album is coming out. So, I mean, it's on like YouTube and there's random things out there. Accordionfest.com is where we have our annual accordion festival, and there's a bunch of video clips on there.
Okay.
But yes, soon there will be a legit album.
Okay, and we'll make sure to put that in the show notes because I'm fascinated by it. How somebody selects an instrument like the accordion and now how do you pronounce that again? The
Didgeridoo.
Didgeridoo. That's incredible. That's incredible. So speaking of incredible, you have a pretty incredible podcast. It's
thanks.
No
that you've been on, by the way.
I know. I love it. I love it. And what attracted me was the name. It's kind of like, oh, I like this gal. I like that title. It's like I got to know her. So how did you come up with that title? And tell us a bit about the what the genre is, the niche, and who you've had on your podcast.
Right. Well, it came about because my ongoing theme in my work in fitness and in nutrition, which started in 2011, is why is there so much BS out there? We just talked about some of it from the ageist perspective, right? All these messages that we get about how women especially are not supposed to show their age, etc. There's a lot of this kind of stuff in the diet industry, in the fitness industry, and within veganism. There's a lot of pseudoscience, things like cleanses and like things that are just not supported by peer-reviewed evidence. And that was kind of annoying me. So I said, okay, well, what can I do to chip away at this mountain of BS, which is basically everything that's not evidence-based.
Right.
And I thought, well, having conversations with experts who work in different fields, like we've had profs on the show, we've had pro athletes on the show, people like Robert Cheek, who everybody knows, anyone who's been vegan for more than 3 minutes knows who Robert Cheek is. Folks like that who are really spreading awareness of veganism, but then also folks who don't have a huge social media platform, who are actually doing the research that everyone's talking about. So professors, researchers, there was a gastroenterologist sharing her research about the gut connection with health and how vegans actually have more diverse gut microbiomes than non-vegans, like cutting edge research. It's really fascinating. So when I started in 2018, I had a list of like maybe 9 or 10 people that I wanted to interview. And I'm like, well, we'll see how long this goes for. Maybe 2 months. And now it's 6 years later. And we still have amazing people like yourself on the show.
Oh, and well, thank you. And how many episodes have you had published?
180 is coming out. So we do episodes incredible. Every 2 weeks.
And I've looked at your lineup of speakers. It's pretty incredible. And I'm just thrilled to be among that. So that's fabulous. And one of the things I noticed is that with your books and with your podcast and just with who you are, you've been able to get a lot of media recognition, and you've been picked up by the media a lot. Talk to us about how that came about. And again, let's go back to the authors or those who have coaching businesses and they want to get some visibility. What would you recommend to people? So
Great
start
question.
with how you got it and then what you would recommend.
Okay, well, how I got it was a little accidental. So I was working in a gym, working one-on-one with clients, not with a vegan focus, just like one-on-one personal training, starting a business, working with clients. Did that for 7 years, which I think is important, by the way, for people who want to be online coaches. I think it's absolutely imperative to have in-person training experience for at least a year, if not more. Anyways, so I was doing this training while writing my first book, which of course was about veganism. Now, when this book came out in 2014, a lot of, things like the HuffPost website and book review sites and things picked it up, which sent people to my website. This is all SEO, which, by the way, is the lifeblood of our business. So 90% of our leads come through organic Google searches. So we're not paying for them. It's literally people typing in vegan fitness coaching or vegan nutrition help or whatever it is. So I kind of noticed it by accident because of this first book. Like, oh, hey, there's traffic to my website because people are reading Vegan Vitality. And now they're like, who is this Karina character? At which point I decided to niche down and become a vegan fitness coach and make it very obvious that this is who I work with. This is my target market. And it's around the same time that I went completely online, which was 2017. So at this point, you have a niche. And what I would recommend now for business owners is you can't just be a vegan coach. You have to niche within the niche. Back then, which was only a couple years ago, if you think about it, there weren't that many vegan coaches or vegan anything, really.
Right.
But now you have like the bikini vegan coach or the running vegan coach or the powerlifting vegan coach. And we are the weight neutral, no BS vegan coaches. So it's a certain niche that we inhabit within the coaching world.
Right.
And that's what we use to get interviews or book reviews or people coming to us for advice, writing for other outlets.
Right.
So I write for Alive magazine, for example. That was huge, especially for SEO. So any sort of connections that you can make with people, very specific to whatever your niche is, whether it's a magazine, whether it's other professionals, whether it's a podcast swap, kind of like what we're doing. So you've been on my show, I'm on your show. That all leads to visibility online.
Right.
And it's all really targeted toward the people that you want to work with.
You know, I love that you said that, because recently I did a training for a group of vegan health coaches, and we were talking about getting on podcasts, starting a summit, being on a summit. And I had one gentleman that something I said triggered him. I don't know what it was, but something I said, because he just pushed back on everything I said. And he goes, I don't agree with you. I think you're wrong. And I said, well, what do you not agree with me this time about? He goes, you don't need to market a podcast. You just need to put a podcast up and let people find it. And I'm going, you know, if that works for you, that's great. But the reality is there are proactive things that you need to do. And you just gave a really great list of those. We'll be sure to put those in the show notes. So in what you're doing, with the length of time you've been doing this, and you've seen some changes. You mentioned that, you know, what worked when you first started no longer works. There, you have to niche within a niche. And a lot of times people get really frustrated because change nowadays can happen so quickly. What would you say to those people that resist the change and they go, I want it to go? Because I started with digital marketing back in 1997. So you can well imagine how it would. That was back when people didn't even have AOL. It was just coming out. And, you know, you'd speak to a group of 100 people in person, and you'd say, how many of you have email? One or two would raise their hand, and the rest would be like, you have an email? What's an email? And that, back in the days when people said, what's internet? They had no clue. So things have dramatically changed. What would you say to those people who dig their heels in and they go, well, last year, this was what the truth was, and it changes so rapidly?
Well, it's a great point, because I feel like some businesses do well because they're not keeping up with the trends, and other businesses are just left behind. So I think it depends what the thing is that you're resisting and how it applies to the people that you're helping.
Right.
But in general, I think part of owning a business, and not just a hobby, running a business as your main gig, part of that deal is being able to adapt. And your business, I mean, look at the pandemic, for example. If you weren't online during those 2 to 3 years, your business folded, essentially.
Right.
Especially as coaches and people who did things fully in person. So the theme is, if you want a long-term, successful, whatever that looks like to you, business, one of the skills you need to have is rolling with the punches, is changing. You know, there are certain things that I am resisting. I'm not on TikTok, but you know why? Because my clients aren't on TikTok either. So
Bingo.
there's a reason for the madness.
Thank you. Yeah. You just nailed that one on the head, because it's amazing how many people will say, I remember back in the day, people would go, you have to be on Facebook. It's like, are your clients on Facebook?
That's it.
It's like with a lot of the people I've worked with, their clients are on LinkedIn. They go, well, I don't like LinkedIn. And it's like, well, your clients do. So, you know, you might learn to like it.
Exactly.
What about AI? What's your take on AI and going beyond Chat GPT? I mean, a lot of people, you say AI and that's what they see as AI. Have you incorporated that into your business? Do you see yourself incorporating it into your business?
We have not incorporated into our business, with the exception of using Chat GPT for brainstorming. I think it's never going to write content for us, but it comes up with article outlines or funny headline ideas. You know, it's basically a brainstorming tool. But here's the thing with AI, it is never going to replace human relationships. And coaching is really about human relationships.
Right, right.
Honestly, ChatGPT or whatever other AI is out there could write a decent strength training program. It's not going to be exactly individualized necessarily, but it'll be decent. It's not going to be that much worse than a coach you're paying, but it doesn't have the eyeballs creeping on you. It doesn't have the feedback loop. It doesn't have the human relationship. So yeah, it can be useful in certain cases, but it's kind of the difference between someone saying, oh, well, I'm just going to follow some YouTube videos for workouts versus I have a relationship with this coach who cares about my goals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I just got a bug. My niece is 40 years old. She does Pilates and she's in great shape. She's had 3 kids and very active, and she can, you know, put her leg above her head. And it's like, how do you do that? So I wrote her, she had a really nice story on Facebook. And I wrote her and I said, am I too old to do Pilates? She goes, you're never too old. And she goes, here's my recommendation. So I actually am kind of getting the Pilates bug and trying to find a place to learn Pilates. And I was thinking that same thing. I could go to YouTube. I could look for some videos, but it's not going to be the same thing as having a coach right there teaching me exactly what I need to do. So do you get involved at all with Pilates or anything like that? Is that something that you've explored? Is it something that you've just not had an interest in?
Kind of both. We haven't explored it and we aren't super into it because our main love is lifting heavy shit and kettlebells and barbells and dumbbells.
I love it.
That's not to say our clients don't do Pilates though, because a lot of our clients are not just doing strength training. I mean, that's what they're doing with us, but some of them are training for like road races. Some of them are high level cyclists. Some of them want to do 5K runs. Some of them do Pilates. So in a lot of cases, we are what we consider workout curators. So we're going to set you up with the strength training. We're programming everything you need to do day 1, step 1, 2, 3, etc. But all the other stuff gets fed into that. So we're working with people on, okay, well, if you want to strength train 3 days a week, where are you going to do your Pilates or your yoga class or your rowing or whatever? So we aren't certified as Pilates instructors, but it comes up a lot in terms of what other people are doing with their fitness.
Okay. I mean, I'm just amazed at what my niece can do. And it's like, oh, you know, I wonder if that's possible at my age. And it's like, yeah, I think
I bet you it is.
Could be. I think it is. I think it is. So, you know, in the whole strength training arena, what would you say for you is your favorite strength training move? Do you like legs? Do you like biceps? Do you like delts? What's your favorite?
My favorite is chin-ups, hands down.
Wow. That's well, you play the accordion. What would we expect?
Well,
but chin-ups, I love it. I love it.
There's a video of me on Instagram doing chin-ups with a 25-pound accordion chained around my waist just for shits and giggles. So you can have both the accordion and the chin-ups in one video if you want.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I want to talk a little bit about bone density because I know that is a big issue as we age. You know, there's a lot of people, the grip power and bone density and balance. Those are, if people don't have that aligned in the right way, when they trip on something, usually it's because they can't grab or they don't have good balance that they break something. So how important is it for your clients to know what their bone density is?
Well, I think a lot of folks do know what their bone density is because that's why they're coming to us.
Ah, okay.
Right? So our ideal client is over 50. Most of them are female. And they are strength training for longevity reasons, for being around for their grandkids, for being functional when they're 100. So a lot of folks come to us already having done their DEXA scan, which is the easiest way of finding out what your bone density is. And they say, hey, I need help with this. Like that was the catalyst for why they're now interested in strength training. Other folks have it more on their radar, so they don't know exactly what their bone density is, but they want to strength train for many reasons, including bone density. So there's kind of 2 approaches. Some people are like, oh crap, I need to do something about my bone density. Here's my chart. And then other people know that it's important, but they don't really have numbers for it.
Okay. Okay. Now this one just popped up and it came way out of left field, but and this is a for real question. It's like, how much does strength training improve a woman's libido as she gets older?
That's a good question. I actually don't know. I've heard that strength training can increase testosterone, which
Mhm.
we all have. Every human has testosterone.
Absolutely.
It's just in different amounts, right? And so that's related to sex drive. And I would assume that strength training increasing those hormones then would increase sex drive, but I'm not sure. I would have to look at more research on that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because it just popped in my head because I know when I'm in really good shape, when I've lifted weights, when I'm really at a prime in my energy level and eating healthy, I
Hmm.
feel great. I have a lot of confidence. And when I don't have that confidence, and lack of confidence obviously is going
That's
to
a good
impact other
point.
areas.
Yeah. So a
So,
lot of it is actually comfort in our own bodies,
right.
whether or not physiological things are changing. I think there's something really empowering about strength training. Whether or not your body actually changes, you'll probably feel better about what your body can do. And that translates into a whole bunch of other areas for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, as you move forward in your business and in your life, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years?
Well, I don't really know. I read a book called Goal Free Living multiple years back,
Hmm.
and I don't
Hmm.
make goals for my business anymore. So a lot of it is just like what opportunities are going to present themselves. I
Hmm.
never knew I was going to host a podcast. So that just kind of showed up as an option. I was like, oh, let me pursue this. So part of it is just being open to really cool opportunities that might show up. At this point, I'm very lucky to have a great team that works with me. So Coach Zoe is the head coach in our business. She works with all our clients. We've got Coach Kaylin who steps in. We have Izzy who works on the podcast. We have Fina who edits the podcast. So it's this great team of folks who keep everything running. So on Fridays, I can go off and teach music for fun.
I
So
love it.
that's kind of where I'm at, is like, what else can I do to support our clients, to have those relationships, to grow the team potentially, but also do some fun stuff like go play didgeridoo at a show on Saturday.
I love it. I love it. And besides your music, what else do you do for fun?
Well, music is basically it. It's the
Okay.
main thing. So it takes a lot of time. Got to practice every day. I have lots of gigs. I'm teaching. There's a lot of preparation involved. I run the annual accordion fest that I mentioned, which is huge. Well, huge as in like for a small town of 13,000 people.
Right, right,
Anyways,
right.
um, so I also open water swim. So this is my thing. It's unfortunately winding down now. I'm kind of sad about the season ending,
Right.
but just being out there on our amazing lakes and oceans and just with my swim club that my friend and I run. So that's for the summer season. We're out there swimming. We did a big half marathon swim in the summer. It's kind of what everyone was training for. And other than that, hanging out with my cats, hanging out with my husband, eating my body weight in dark chocolate.
Aha. Okay. So in closing, Karina, what are your final thoughts for people? What would you like to leave them with?
Well, I think going back to that concept of biting off less than you think you can handle, whether that is for your fitness, whether that is for starting a business, whether it's for growing a business, whether it's for going vegan, any sort of long-term habit change, as James Clear says in his amazing book, Atomic Habits, which I'd recommend, by the way,
Great book.
is identity change. So habit change is not just behaviors, it's also changing who you are and how you see yourself. So if you're going to become someone who eats only plants, you need to see yourself as having an identity as a vegan person. And that takes a long time. I'm learning a new instrument right now. I'm learning djembe, which I've never learned. I've got a teacher. It's a hand drum, like an African
Okay.
drum. And so
Is
I'm not
that
at the
the
point.
one, it's a big circular drum with indents around it?
Oh no, that's a steel hand pan
Okay.
or steel drum. This is
Okay.
like you have it between your legs and it's like a full-on percussion
Oh,
instrument.
okay. Okay.
But I'm not at the point where I call myself a djembe player. It's not part of my identity yet. But I'm practicing, I'm doing my lessons, I'm, kind of jamming with the band occasionally. So I'm putting in these small votes for the type of identity that I want, which is eventually a drummer, which I'm not currently. And you can do the same thing, whether it's 10 push-ups,
Hmm.
whether it's eating one meal that's plant-based, whether it's going outside your comfort zone and joining LinkedIn or whatever method you need to attract clients, it needs to be manageable and it needs to be smaller than you think, because you have to vote for the type of person you want to be, and you have to give yourself small wins at the same time.
I love it. I love it. And, you just brought up another question for me with identity. How important is the people we surround ourselves with to our identity?
There's a cliche that we're the sum of the 5 people that we spend most of our time with. And I mean, I don't know how legit that is.
Somebody made a lot of money off of that. I
Right?
forget who
I
it was
know.
that wrote
Me
a book
too.
about it and everything. So
I don't know how scientifically backed that is exactly, but it makes sense if you think about it. So I think it makes a big difference. I think in some cases we don't have a choice. We have kids, we have dependents, we have folks that we can choose to be with, like our spouse, for example. So I think there's a lot of agency that we have in who is around us. In some cases we don't, though. And I don't want to leave folks out who don't have a choice for who's around them. I mean, we're pretty privileged to make that decision. Like, I'm going to have these people in my life.
Right.
So yeah, I think there's some truth to it, but I don't know how true it is about this whole like 5 people is 80% of your identity or
Right.
whatever
And
the
your
formula
income
is.
and yada, yada, yada. So
Yeah.
great point. Great point. Well, Karina, this has been delightful. I just really enjoyed all that you shared with people. And I encourage people go to KarinaInkster.com. That's KarinaInkster.com. We'll have that in the show notes, and check out what she's doing. Cause I got to tell you, this woman is a rock star. You've been listening to the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. I'm your host, Kathleen Gage, and I encourage you, live with a very, very aware point of view and perspective with every bite that you take, with every weight that you lift, with every step that you take. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, Kathleen.
Thank you. You've been listening to the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. I'm your host, Kathleen Gage, inviting you to subscribe to this channel wherever you're listening or watching the show. And please let your friends know about the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. Live healthy.